Welcome to the Beauty Pro Wellness Podcast, the podcast that mixes wellness with personal development tips and info specifically for beauty industry professionals. I'm your host, Abby O'Sullivan, a longtime esthetician and lash artist turned wellness coach. With burnout and health issues on the rise amongst my beauty pro friends, I know we need a space to come together, to learn, support each other, and get the push you need to take care of your health. Together, we'll dive into topics like mobility training for a less achy body, managing stress and the chaos of running a business and handling clients, setting up your self-care routines, and so much more. You deserve to feel as good as your clients do when they leave you. Let's make time for you, starting with this podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Beauty Pro Wellness Podcast. Today, you're going to be hearing a conversation that I had via Instagram Live with Laura Ter Beek. She is a lash artist out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I did a series of Instagram Lives on the Beauty Pro Wellness Pod account. And so the quality, I'm just warning you, the quality might not be a hundy because it wasn't my normal podcast Zoom setup. And I don't know if our connection cut out at the end or what happened when I was downloading the video. You got to go through this whole rigmarole to download a freaking live video from Instagram. You got to download a whole totally different app and do it that way now. And it cut off. We were close to the end, but I don't know what else we were talking about after that, so I can't fill you in. This was a couple months ago now, so I'm just getting around to I wanted to put these interviews, these conversations with, I had 4 different ones. I wanted to get these conversations onto the podcast where you can just easily listen to them, hear them, and definitely I feel relate to these women. They're so amazing. So my first guest is Laura Ter Beek. We met at the Lash Conference in Pasadena, California in 2022. She came up to me at one of the parties and she was like, I want to connect with you. Let's connect. She's like, I love what you do, talking about health and wellness, and I want to chat with you. And so the next day we were able to sit down and we totally jammed out on talking about mobility and strength and wellness and her journey as a lash artist and kind of finding some of her own wellness habits / routines. And she had hosted a retreat, a wellness retreat. So you'll hear more about her obviously in this interview, but I want to give you just a little bit of background because there's no formal intro or anything like that. We just jump right into the conversation. I cut out the little bits where, we're connecting on Instagram Live and you know how long that takes. Anyway, maybe you don't, but Laura had expressed interest in an event, maybe collaborating on an event with LashCon, separate from LashCon, and it just really got the wheels turning. And I was talking to other people throughout that last day of the con and started to think of the Beauty Pro Wellness Collective. And as I mentioned in the launch episode of the Beauty Pro Wellness podcast, that's where the podcast comes from, is originally the collective idea. So I asked Laura if she wanted to be a part of this and just a supporter, and she was like, yes. And she's just such a sweet person, and I love what she's doing. So let me tell you a little bit more about Laura, and then we'll jump into the conversation. She has been in the beauty industry for over a decade, a lash artist for 7 of those, and owns Lash Folk, a lash artistry and education studio in downtown Chattanooga. She says, since the beginning of my career, I've noticed the need for peace in the beauty industry. Service providers often give so much of themselves, but don't take the time to refill and recharge. This has become the norm and almost the expectation in our industry. Several years ago, I experienced burnout like a punch in the face when years of ignoring stressors caught up with me. In 2020, I pursued and completed my breathwork coach certification and my yoga teacher training to better understand how stress and anxiety manifest in the body and what we as individuals can do to control them. She has a passion to help this industry refill and recharge through building community with other artists and training artist techniques and skills to create businesses that they actually enjoy showing up to. She believes we do not have to give until we are empty and experience pain or constantly stress as we do the work that we do. I hope that you will go give her a follow. Go find her on Instagram, Lash Folk. I will link it in the show notes. And please enjoy this conversation.
How are you today? Good. You just had a lash. I'm good. You just had a lash social, didn't you?
Yeah, yesterday I had a lash social. It was a lot of fun. It was the first one that's really come together, like that's just like a come hang out type of thing. And it was a lot of fun. So I'm glad that it worked out. And it was slumber party themed, which was why there was
Yeah.
like blankets and pillows and like I had Ferris Bueller's Day Off
Love
playing
it.
like in the
Love that
background because I'm a
movie.
total nerd. So yeah, I know, it was fun. So yeah, it was
I'm
a
glad.
good
I'm glad. It looked
time.
cozy. It looked fun.
Yeah, it was good. So
Yeah.
hopefully there will be more in the
I
future.
love that. So
We'll see.
I introduced briefly how we met at the Lash conference and how you came up to me and you were like, I want to get together and hang out. And so I would love for you to share now just more about who you are, where you're from, your business, where you're located, and all of that.
Okay, so I am in Chattanooga, Tennessee right now. I've been here for almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in April, and I've had my studio here for about a little over a year and a half. So I lived in Florida for 14 years, and I lived in Wisconsin before that, but my like business life started in Florida, I guess. So I have been a cosmetologist for over 10 years, and I've been doing lashes for 7 of those years exclusively. Like I just dropped any other cosmetology thing and went for lashes because I fell in love with it. Cosmetology was my backup plan, and I intended to go to school for photography. And when I found lashes, it was actually like a very extreme fork in the road of like, you have two choices. You either go down the original path you had planned on, or you do lashes. And I saw them as equal opportunities, but I was just, I guess, more interested in lashes at the time. So I went for it, and I knew that I wouldn't lose my photography like aspect because that's just
Hmm.
so huge visually
Yeah.
in our industry. So yeah, so I've been here for a year and a half, and I have my artistry and education studio in downtown, and I love it. And that's where we had the social yesterday. I love connecting with other artists, and so I was super excited to finally meet you at LashCon and be able to like be like, hey, we should hang out
Yeah,
for a second.
of
So thank
course.
you
Thanks
for
for
doing
coming
that. That
after
was
me. I mean,
awesome.
you never know
Yeah.
until you just like, if you want to get to know somebody, just like approach them. You never know, right? And
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I
And
loved
go ahead.
your like I said that you were expressing like a desire to support like doing an event and health and wellness and promoting that in the industry. And that came from your own experience, which I know like all of our like the co-founders, like our experience like is rooted in like some sort of pain or burnout. Like yes.
Pain and suffering.
Like we love what we do, but there's this other aspect to it. And I would love to hear your story. I mean, love to hear your story about your pain and suffering. But I just know because so many people do struggle with that. And I think that we know that we're not alone, but it can feel like, gosh, we must just not be doing something right, or I need to fix this or fix that. And there's certainly things that we can do. So I would love for you to share your story with about like experiencing that pain and that burnout and what switches, like what changes you made to help yourself.
Yeah, so I will try to
No
stay
worries.
on track. I
Me
tend to
too.
tangent, so if I get lost, bring me back. But I'll start off by saying, and I've talked about this with you already, but it's just so common in our industry that it's like you're gonna suffer if you're in this industry. That's just what you do. Like you're a service provider, and it's part of the game that we play. And I don't believe that that's true. I believe that there's a lot of like ways around that, especially since I've fallen down so many times
Mhm.
and had to stand back up. But essentially, so I started at Aveda, which I feel like was a very good foundation as far as like wellness goes. So I was thankful for that. But I went on to run my business really early, and I didn't realize it until years down the road, but I ended up having a lot of people working with me. There was one point where I had like 7 yoga instructors, an acupuncturist, an esthetician, a lash artist, a front desk person, and I was like really young too. Like I had no business doing what I was doing. And I was working full time as well as a lash artist. And so I things weren't going the way that I wanted them to. And I was really evaluating kind of where that came from. And I ended up looking back and realizing like my dream whenever I planned it out was being on my own. Like I just had all these opportunities to help people or work with people. And I'm so
Mhm.
thankful that I did it. But I realized that wasn't actually the path that I was supposed to be on necessarily. But I just like, I love the team aspect of things and I love working with people, which is why something like this is really great. But so when I had had my studio for 3 years at that point, and I was working full time, running the full studio, trying to get everybody their clients, trying to take care of my clients, trying to be present in the community as well. There was like community events we were trying to get going in our city as well. And I I kind of felt it coming, but I like ignored it. It was coming for years at that point. And I went to a conference in Connecticut and I didn't want to go in the first place, but I felt like I needed to. It was a
Okay.
strategies conference,
Hmm.
actually, if you
Yeah.
are familiar from LashCon. And so I was like, I need to do this to like know what my next steps are, but I didn't want to. I did not like Connecticut. It was cold and dreary
Just
and
like
like,
piling on top of like you're
um,
already like, I don't want to go and it's cold and like I don't want to be here.
yes, it was miserable. I learned a lot and it confirmed what I already kind of knew. And I started to kind of recognize burnout symptoms there. And I came home and I had kind of already made my decision there. I came home and I don't really remember the next week. So what I do remember is like I slept in the guest bedroom because I thought I might be like actually like contagious with something, like sick. And I remember my husband like waking me up and telling me I needed to eat and feeling like trying to get out of bed felt like someone was like actually holding me down and like trying to like physically get up. And so that kind of, I came out of that after a week. And then part of what really like increased my burnout was that I wasn't eating throughout the day. I thought I was eating correctly because I was doing what everyone else was doing. And I didn't really think that I needed to be doing anything differently. And that has impacted me like up to this day still. So I had really low, not really low, but I had low enough blood sugar and high enough stress that those two things together just like creates a really awful thing. And yeah, like I said, that continues kind of to this day. But so it would take me like when I'm saying this because I'm like, people eat your food like when you're working. Once I finally came out of that, for the next like at least 6 months, I would say, it would take me 2 hours to
Mhm.
get down a meal of food because my stomach was just so like not okay. Like it was so confused at what was happening that I would be nauseous for 2 hours while I was trying to just like get down a regular small like meal of food. And so at some point in there, I'm not even sure, I think it was within that first week that I was home, I did end up going to the ER because I wasn't sure what was happening. And of course, it was
Hmm.
inconclusive because it was all
Yeah.
stress
That's
related.
the incredible impact of
Yeah,
really
so
high stress and not enough nourishment, which could be like food, hydration, rest, stress care, essentially for your body. It's very
all of the
intense.
things. Yeah. Yeah, so I like did blood work again. Like there weren't any like real red flags. It was just like, oh well, your cortisol is kind of high, and your blood glucose is kind of low, and that's enough to create this perfect storm that you're experiencing. And so I just really had to like be mindful of what I was doing and what I needed to change. And so throughout that, I decided obviously that there were some big changes I needed to make. I was eating as much as I could to just like get through the day. So that meant 6 times a day
Like
I was
probably
eating.
like smaller meals so that you could get them down and like let your body acclimate to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it had like if I went past the 2 hour mark,
Mm-hmm.
like I was sick. And so it was like, yeah, every 2 hours I was eating something. And so I was like, what can I do to kind of overcome this and like survive the industry? Like, if I'm going to keep going, because there was a lot of stuff that was also happening during that time. My landlord at the spa was not letting me renew my lease because she
Mm-hmm.
wanted to sell the building. And I had like staff that I had to worry about and a lot of pressure from like that going on that I had to figure out. So I eventually, I think it was actually, that was all 2019. Then the pandemic hit. And either during that time or right before that time, I invested in breath coach certification and yoga teacher training. And I did that for me. I liked the idea of being able to help other people, but I really needed to figure out how to like understand how the stress was happening in my body because I didn't recognize it. I just again, it's like I felt like what I was doing was normal, what I was experiencing was normal. It was every day. Like you don't really pay attention to it when it
Yeah.
is
Well, and if it's a
constant.
slower build too, and you're thinking like, well, I've got all this on my
Mm-hmm.
plate, like this is probably what everyone deals with, or like how a lot of people feel.
Yeah. So I did those and I really started to understand like physically how how like I was having major anxiety attacks too and I didn't know that that's what was happening. I was just like, what is this? Why do I feel terrible? And I was able to start recognizing like the build up to it and how I could stop it with the breath work that I was learning, that like a lot of the practices and mind stuff that I had built up through being human and being a woman and then also doing like yoga as we usually know it was not necessarily the right thing for my body. And so the yoga teacher training that I took was very focused on mobility and stuff like that and helped me kind of go in a different
Hmm.
direction that way too.
Yeah.
But yeah, did I
Yes, you
answer your
did.
question?
So I'm curious, when you were experiencing, when you kind of knew that you were experiencing symptoms of burnout, what would you describe the symptoms as? Like, what did it come to the surface as? Manifest is what I was going to say. What did it manifest as?
So early on, I would say what I recognized was like I would have a really fast, really fast heartbeat, really tight chest. And what happened in Connecticut is when I would eat at lunch, I would feel lightheaded and like I was going to be sick. But yeah, tight chest. I always dealt with, of course, our physical structure has a lot to do with it, but I always dealt with like feeling like a brick in
Different.
my neck and shoulders.
Yeah.
Like I would get massages. I had like massage therapists working with me, and they could never, I mean, there was nothing they could do because I just wasn't taking care of myself. But it was mostly like the tightness in my chest and feeling like I couldn't breathe. And then later, what I've discovered, even like years later, is that physically my anxiety manifests in my
Hmm.
throat and in my jaw, and it's pain. It's just straight pain, and even into the roof of my mouth. And like, I never understood that there was that much of a connection between physical, like, feeling and like
Hmm.
mental anxiety. Like, it was just crazy to find that out. So that's mostly what my
Hmm.
experience was.
And then when you felt like you were eating like everyone else, what do you mean by that? Like you weren't eating enough, but you felt like you were doing what everyone else was doing? Do you mean like you were working all day long, like I'm supposed to just work, 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 work. Everybody else is doing that, so that must be the thing. Is that what you mean by that, or something different?
Yeah, so I would always have breakfast and I would typically have dinner, but there would never be a lunch. There would never be like snacks. And I would often have coffee in the place of that, and like a good amount of
Yeah.
like cups and cups of coffee. I am coffee obsessed. That is something that I am. I drink a big old like American sized cup of coffee in the morning. And then these days I have a latte in the afternoon, like every day. And that's fine for me. That works for the most part. But I mean, I would just like, I had a coffee maker and it was just like there
Yeah.
was always coffee on my desk. And that obviously did not help with stress buildup. But yeah, so the other problem is keto became
Okay.
very popular back then. And I was surrounded by
Yeah.
people that were doing that. And so, although like I grew up around diet culture and that was very much, so I like didn't have a good body image to start with. And so I was always surrounded by that. And so I already had this like broken piece that was like, you need to really focus on like what you're taking in. And then everyone around me started doing keto, and it was like,
Mm-hmm.
don't have carbs, don't have carbs, don't have carbs. And so, like, I would even be sitting there, and like, all I would have was like, even a piece of fruit. And I'm like, oh, the carbs, so I probably shouldn't. Like, and I didn't even believe in keto. Like, I wasn't trying to do keto, but it was just like, because that's what I was hearing constantly. And I was so focused or like drowning really, like in what I was doing. I didn't have the brain space to like
Yeah.
cut that out or
Mm-hmm.
like mute that part of it. And so whatever was in front of me, even if it was like a bag of chips, I was like, I shouldn't have that because it has fat or because it has
Mm-hmm.
carbs or whatever. And so I would just avoid it, and then I would just cover
Yeah.
it up with
Yeah.
coffee.
That type of thing like
So yeah.
will permeate like a culture, a group of people. I remember I haven't worked in bigger salon environments much in my life, but in the most recent time, that is definitely one of those things that when one person starts it and it really works for them, and then everyone wants to do it, but also experience as a health and wellness coach, like that's how it goes, but it doesn't mean that's the right thing for everyone, and it doesn't mean it's like a long-term solution. And we need carbs. They're great for our energy. But I totally
I
I get
know,
how
they're
that
so
happens.
good.
So it's like, and then when you don't have the bandwidth to really like look into it, or when you're just so busy and you're so stressed and you're kind of disconnected anyway, you're just kind of like, it's just easier to just sort of, okay, well, like this is the thing and this is what they say, and like I don't really have time to think about it. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. You like don't have time to do your own research, and so you're just like accepting kind of
hmm
what's in front of you just to like get by and survive, which
Yeah,
typically doesn't work.
survive is the key word there, not thrive, which we want everyone to
Right.
thrive. So I love that you went into yoga and breath work for your own, not necessarily to like make it another part of your career or anything like that, even if you could, but you did it to find what works best for you. And I think that's really important to remember when people are looking to improve or expand in their own health journey, is to find the things that work for you. So like, okay, maybe keto does work for you for a little bit, you really like it. Definitely do your research on the long term if that is something that is actually sustainable for you and your goals and the way you want to live. That's just like one example. But, I think any type of resistance training, no matter what it is, like yoga is a form of resistance training if you're using your body to like hold yourself up. I think that's really great, but I also want to encourage people to find the ways that they like to move and they like to help their body. Or if meditation isn't great for you, maybe you like breath work, or maybe this or that. Eventually, you try enough things, that you find something that you really, really love. And then I think you can dive into it and then possibly get more interested in other things from there. But it's like just finding one thing that feels really good to you, and just like going all in on it and just being with that and loving it.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting because you're talking about like what feels good to you. And I think that a lot of us are not choosing what we're doing based off of what feels good. I think we're choosing what we're doing. I definitely was based off of what looks good, what sounds good, what other people are doing again. And so it's like, you know, flexibility is like everyone wants to be flexible, right? And like the damage you can do to your body in certain ways when you're doing that, and like prioritizing that over mobility, or like the way that certain postures are held in yoga. And like, first of all, why in the beginning they were
Yeah.
even invented to do that is not necessarily what
Mm-hmm.
we're using them for. And understanding, like, when you come out of that yoga class, like, are you actually, and it's not just yoga, it's any workout, right? It's like being aware, and we talked about like awareness is huge, but being aware of like, are you coming out and you're actually feeling like lighter, you're feeling well, you're feeling good about it? Or like, if you really take a moment to like pause and like be in that like present moment in your body, like, are you in pain? Like, in a not good way. Like, there is pain for growth, and then there is pain for like, maybe my body didn't need that specifically, or
Mm-hmm.
didn't enjoy that specifically. And again, we overlook so much of that because we're just we're like getting through the present moment, right? We're not like in it, we're getting through it, and we're on to the next thing. We're not paying attention to how our body is in a lot of these circumstances. And I think it's really important to like take a pause and like see what we really enjoy
Mm-hmm.
and how it's working
Absolutely. There
for our
is
body.
that fine line of like the differentiation between the pain for growth and the pain like that is kind of like, no, that's actually not great. And I think also like, when we're talking about this, because I mean, yeah, sometimes there's gonna be discomfort in the fact that like you might be trying something new and it feels weird and it feels uncomfortable. And then it could be that, you're trying to push yourself too hard into stretches your body's not ready for. Maybe you're not really connected to breath. And that stuff can come with time. But I agree, like checking in and making sure that what you're doing. I'll give myself as an example because earlier this summer when I was under quite a bit of stress, I was in the midst of a strength training program that I actually freaking love. Like I love it. It's so much fun. It really like builds the body, but it's intense and I needed better recovery than what I was getting. Like so much stress, not great rest, wasn't really eating enough protein. Like there were a lot of things that weren't really in check for me to be kicking my own ass in the gym. And I was sore for like 2 and 3 days after, like just stiff. And I'm like, okay, man, I know I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
older, but man, I am just not recovering from these hard ass workouts like I used to. And so I dialed back because I was like, I just really I don't want to be sore that long. I don't think this is good for my body. Like if I'm under that much stress, then my body is not going to properly recover. Like I'm not doing myself favors here. I'm actually just stressing my body out more. And of course, I think that this awareness comes with some education and it comes with some trial and error and just knowing that it can happen. Like with too much cardio or like all these Orange Theory workouts. Like if you were somebody like you in the past and then you were kicking your ass in Orange Theory, you would have been passing out. Like that's not
I literally had that. I was seeing a personal trainer. I didn't actually pass out, but I was seeing a personal trainer, and she was a friend of mine, so I felt like I could actually talk to her, which I feel like is not something that you often get with that type of situation. But I told her, I was like, I like when I try to get off the floor, or when I try to stand from sitting, I feel like I'm gonna pass out, like in your classes. And
yeah.
I wasn't overdoing it. I wasn't overdoing it. And that was because I wasn't eating and drinking enough and whatever at that time. But when I would have my personal training sessions with her, it would take me until the day before I
Oh,
met with her the next week to feel like I was like comfortable in my body again. And again, it was nothing with her. We were not doing strenuous
yeah.
stuff to the normal person, but because I was so out of whack, it was just like a whole mess. But yeah, remembering that pain and discomfort in your body is your body telling you that
Yeah.
something isn't right, even if it's just the progress to get you to the next step. But knowing, like, is that what
Yeah.
I'm experiencing, the positive, or is it something that needs to be
Yeah,
looked at
for
a little bit
sure.
more?
Oh my gosh, that's good stuff. I hope people are, when they listen, are going to be able to like, oh my gosh, some light bulbs go off because
Like
yeah,
light bulbs,
I know
hopefully.
back for me, like back in the day when I was like burning out all the time from lashing too long, and it was because of pain. It was because I was just, I don't know, I just didn't have the awareness to like or boundaries to give myself proper breaks. And there is such a thing as just having to recover from this job, from being in one position, whether it's, or even with like massage therapists, they use their body so much. Nail artists or hairstylists or lash artists, like that static position and the repetitive motions that people are in, they're going to have maybe some different pains, but we do need to recover from our day too. It's kind of like a weird sport, if you will. So
I know
yeah, it's
it's
not that we just need to
super weird.
recover from like working out or whatever. It's that we also need some recovery or like some nourishment for our bodies with the type of work that we do, like in so many different forms. So that is like, that could take us on an entirely different conversation. Like,
Next
yeah, that's like,
why.
that is all the stuff to come. That's why we're doing this. So in today, like in these days, what helps you most kind of in your day to day to just like feel really good, feel well? If you do, I guess. I'm assuming that you do feel
So
better these
yeah,
days.
right, right. I feel much better these days, but I will be super duper honest. This past season, like, I'm not a
Yeah,
winter
I
person. I wish I could
know.
hibernate through it. Like, it's not my thing. I'm
Hmm.
summer
I
like
feel you.
100% of the time. So I'm definitely not like on my game as much as I wish I was, but definitely having a smaller schedule has helped and taking clients in a different way. So like my schedule is extremely structured on my work days. I'm taking very few clients right now, and like it was brought up the other day that I could be doing more work, and it was it was like, oh yeah, I could be. I've been limiting myself so much, but with the holidays and travel and everything, I did it on purpose. But it was like, oh, okay, yeah, I could start adding people to my schedule, but like because I've been through this so much and for so many years, I'm like, how do I not crash? Like that's instantly the first thing in my mind is like, I will crash if. And so number one, so I'm really bad at like I was bad at eating before because I was limiting. I'm not limiting anymore. Like I just downed a bunch of like
Oh,
greek
yeah.
chow, which is chocolate and peanut butter.
I
Like
have a
it
bowl of
was
oatmeal
delicious.
waiting for me.
And so like I'm not limiting, but I'm not good at preparing foods and having them available for me. And so that's something that I have become very aware of over the years. And what worked for me before was finding a
Hmm.
meal prep service so that I could just have it. And then I have this little like plug-in oven that will warm my
Beautiful.
food while I'm working. And then after I get them out the door, I clean up. Like I have the 5 minutes or whatever to shove whatever food in my mouth, but I'm getting it in. So I'm looking at that before I extend my schedule. I have a laundry problem where it's mentally, I don't have the space, and physically, like I don't have the time. So I'm looking at that as far as coverage goes. And then I feel like there was one more thing, accepting that I can't change years easily. And so, like, part of the reason I had a short schedule on my work days is because I would try to come home and fit in the other stuff that I'm working on, which is my training program. And I'm in a coaching program myself. So, like, that was what I kind of tried to fit in afterwards. And what I realized is, like, my brain does not switch gears like that. So it's like I should just have
Oh
work days
my
where I'm
gosh,
doing
yes.
lashes because
I
my brain is off when
totally
I'm
get
done.
that. I have a
Yeah,
couple
so
things I do myself, and it's so
cannot
hard for
mix.
me to. Yes, we like that's literally like when we were talking last night about sending you like the questions for today. I'm like, that's literally what freaking happens. It's so annoying.
Yeah, yeah. When you said that, I
Yeah,
was like,
like
don't
I
even
already
say anything
know.
else because I totally get it. But so those are like the future things that I need to take into account in order to stay well. And I will say like my fills are much longer than normal fills for people, which is why I'm able to take fewer clients throughout the day as well. but I was taught, like probably all of us, is like you do clients back to back. You don't need to leave time in between. You get your cleaning done, I guess, at the end of the appointment or built into the appointment. That doesn't work for me. So I I started with like a 15-minute break between people to make sure I could get stuff clean, and then I added 15 more minutes, and then I added 15 more minutes. I'm down to 30 minutes between clients, but that's like 15 minutes for cleaning, because I'm sorry, that's what it takes me to
Mhm.
actually clean between clients to like feel good about it. And then I've got extra time to use the bathroom and
Yes.
to eat
You've created some
something if I
spaciousness
don't
in
get
your day.
distracted.
And that's like, okay, so first of all, what I'm hearing is you're looking into delegation for your own self-care and your own like taking things off of your plate, which is amazing via a meal service and potentially laundry. And then also awareness and acceptance of like how you work. And that can take some trial and error and just getting to know yourself and really dialing in on like, I think, how do you want to feel in your business, with your business at the end of your day? And we think like, I think that it gets kind of thrown at us that it's just going to be like one way. You just work hard and then you're exhausted. Like, that's how it is. Like, no, it doesn't have to be that way because there are so many, now maybe in an employee setting it might be a little bit different, but you can still, there are still things that you are in control of even if you don't think so. And also making sure you're getting your breaks. If you're an employee, get your breaks, make sure that they are allowing those on your schedule, because like legally you're allowed breaks if you're working a certain amount of time. But also just your health and well-being is important. And if your employer isn't open to that, like, I don't know what to say, maybe like F them. But if you're a business owner, like you get to do things the way that you want. That's why you got into business for yourself. So if you love working back to back to back to back to back to back to back and feeling completely drained and exhausted and like whatever at the end of the day, or if you're the type of person like that thrives on that, like by all means, but you get to do business the way that you want. And I think that's so important for us to remember and to know like right off the bat. Build your business the way that you want it to look. And that actually helps you
Yeah,
do the things that you
yeah.
want in your life outside of work too, and feel the way that you want outside of work too, because it's not like our life, we have life outside of our businesses as well to live, right? So I love that you're pointing this out because it's just something that I happened upon so much later than I would have liked to as well.
I mean, it's taken years, and I think that's what's great about like this collaboration too, is like we're here from all the pain and suffering, right? And so
Yeah,
like you can skip that if you can just come
yeah,
in at this
yeah.
point and move
We're
forward.
giving you
Like
permission. You
that's
give
the point
yourself
with
permission. Like, it's a thing. It is okay to take care of yourself. You should take care of yourself. Your health should come first. I mean, again, this is a totally different conversation, but I watched my parents, well, especially like my stepdad, just work and work and work and work and work and work and work. That's all I would have ever known. It's just like work, work, work. But I don't want to live that way. Like, I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to spend half the money I'm making on freaking physical therapy because my body is
hmm
objecting, strongly objecting to the
yeah,
work that I do. So,
yeah.
so I love that. Those aren't necessarily things that I feel like we would hear about, is like the delegation and then the acceptance. And and also, I don't know, just to like throw in about the seasons, I think it's totally okay and that we should allow ourselves to shift in different seasons. And it's okay if we just want to rest more in a season. Like for most of us, winter is that type of season where you're kind of just like, I'm just going to accept that that's what I want to do. Like I'm going to try to move my body, but I'm done trying to push myself to like, I don't know, be more in this time when I'm just not really feeling it. If I can get more quiet or inner work done in this time of hibernation and darkness, which is very dramatic, but that's what it is.
That's
It's
what it is
like, and I'm like, okay, we just
though.
have February, and then it's gonna like, it's gonna change. Like, 'cause we can just get to
I know,
March,
I'm
but I
waiting. Oh
know
my
that every
God.
year I get a little bit cranky, and at this time, and I'm like, why don't you just not fight that you kind of don't love it, and just do whatever you need to do for you? to feel good in this season. Like, don't force yourself to go out extra. If you don't like being out in the cold, it's okay. Like, I'm an introvert anyway. I'll stay home all day, every day, until I finally get tired of it. Have you had any challenges in like making time or having to set boundaries to kind of get over some of the past like patterns of overworking and all of that?
So when it comes to like past patterns and stuff, I feel like I'm pretty well. I was just gonna say I feel like I'm pretty good with it, and then the people around me would say like, no, you're still struggling with that, right?
It's a journey.
So that you think you're good. Yeah, it's a journey, and then like yeah, everything starts to kind of like come back to the surface at points, and you're like, oh, I need to revisit that. That's not working for me, and I think that things shift over time too, right? So like the way I was talking about how anxiety manifests in my body, it started showing up differently than I have experienced it before. And so I'm like, oh, well, that's new. I guess I'll be paying attention to that now or whatever. And so I was able to do some hard shifts with work it helped once we moved because it was like clean slate, clean start. How do I want to do this? And so that was really helpful for me. I was kind of waiting for that moment because we had talked about it for forever. But essentially what it came down to is like, what kind of lash artist do I want to be? And like, how do I get there? And that included not being miserable, believe it or not. And so I set very hard lines within my lash business of what I would or wouldn't allow, like on my schedule or in my life. I made it very clear that like, you know, policies and all that, and like those help our mental health, those help our physical health. There are reasons for it more than just like being thinks they're just like pissy 100%. Or whatever. So I feel like I drew a really hard line there, but for like what I want in the future, I don't have that definition as strong. And so it's like I will work really, really hard and overwork for what I want and stress over it and whatever and let it kind of consume me. But like my lash business is fine because it's within these walls and these parameters. So it's like taking that and replicating it in the rest of my life, I definitely need to do. And then my schedule, although I just said it's like very hard lines, my spouse, his schedule just is different every day. And so I try to kind of like work around it. And that has been really hard for me to have those boundaries, I think, for like when too much work is too much at a certain point or just throwing it all out the window, like on certain days or whatever. So I'm kind of working through that now and like developing more of a schedule. And what I've realized in the past year is like there's a system for everything. Literally everything in our life can be systemized and it makes things run so much smoother. And so I'm looking at that's kind of my next boundary is like, how can I get into a routine because I don't have them? How can I systemize things so that those become my boundaries, right? Is like, this is how my machine runs in this program, as robotic as that sounds. But that's kind of like the next boundary that I'm
think when we think about it like that, but it also allows like so much freedom and space if you kind of have that set. So I totally can understand that. I think it's so much easier having that same kind of like, there's some lashing going on part-time, but then there's also work from home stuff going on and like building other things and having projects and this and that. And the more that this grow, like this, easy, go in, show up, do the thing, go home, bye. Like that's it. Like, you know, and like and like whether I've been an employee or had my own, like that's just easy. That seems set. But it is also then figuring out how like my processes work, like how I work best in this other format too. And that was some of when I actually closed my lash business in March and just went full-time working from home, that was like, it was such an interesting like shift mentally to try to figure out, well, to realize like, well, you don't actually, like, number one, you've never worked 9 to 5, like what, those aren't really your hours. So why do you think that you're like this corporate, like 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, or like that's not how you have to work. And if you're working consistently like that, and if you get everything done, like you can shut off before then. Like you don't have to keep going, and you don't have to come back to it either. Like once you get done with your workout for the day. And so it was really there's a lot of feminine energetics and stuff in there too that I learned about, and just how to, and that's a lot of connection to the body and connection to self and connection to our natural rhythms and like a whole other conversation. But it was really eye-opening. And I just continue to try to refine that part because my work from home business has changed a little bit too. So definitely see those struggles. And I think that it just, again, back to the point that it's just a journey. And I think that we just need, when you know what you want, and even as that shifts in life, it's just coming back to like, okay, well then how can I adjust this boundary for this or this system for this? And, knowing that you don't have to have it all figured out right away, like no one does. It's all like an experiment.
Yeah. I think it's really good to talk it out too. Like obviously you have to have boundaries in place and stuff like that, but people that you feel comfortable talking with, because the things that I've discovered over like this past year has been very eye-opening for me. And it all started with a conversation with a client, and it was like it didn't spiral me, but it threw me into all this research about what I was experiencing myself based off of one comment that she made to me. And I was like I stood there shocked when she said it. And I was like, is that me? Is that, like, is she describing me right now? And so like I just did all this research and found out so much about myself and how I work, and how, like, I don't want to say I have never been diagnosed with ADHD, but that's what I am assuming at this point. And to not use that as a crutch, but to be like, how are those people succeeding in life, and using those resources, whether or not I have it, to see how I can change my life. And the past year, like, I am not the same person I was at the beginning of last year, because just the way that I've noticed that I work on things. And like for me, like you talk about shutting down the computer, like it's okay to walk away and stuff like that. My struggle is hyper focus and not even realizing the time that's passing, not like saying 10 times, yes, I'll do that, to someone that's asking me to get up and do something, and not realizing that it's been an hour when they first asked me. And so just like noticing those things, but that, and I've talked to multiple people throughout the year that do deal with those kinds of things, and just, it's crazy how many of us, again, deal with the same thing, but we're not talking about it because either we think it's normal, or we're not paying attention to it, or we know it's not normal and we don't know where to go. And so it's just like, these things are super duper common, and almost everyone I've talked to is like, oh yeah, I deal with that too in this way, this is how I deal with it. And looking up podcasts, looking up like Instagrams and whatever, and finding how people work through these problems, whether it's physical pain, anxiety, ADHD stuff, like seeing how they work through it and seeing, will it work for you? And maybe it won't, but you can try and toss it.
Thank you for tuning into the Beauty Pro Wellness Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes, leave a review, and share with your friends in the beauty industry. Beauty Pro Wellness Podcast is produced and crafted by Wonder Podcast Productions.